All right, good morning, everyone. And I have some good news, the news that we've all been waiting to hear.
Clean water is again flowing through faucets in Atlanta after multiple water main breaks sent geysers shooting from the streets and disrupted water service across large swaths of the city.
Gwendolyn Smith lives in a senior community in Midtown. Earlier this week, she said the city's water emergency made her day-to-day life challenging.
I'm not going to get in that water now. I showered yesterday. Today, I wiped down with some wipes. Because if that water keep going out like that, it can give you something in your skin and stuff, and I don't want that.
Brittany Peck of Grant Park stopped by her local fire station to pick up a case of water.
We actually went and stayed in a hotel Friday night because we have 2 kids, so we got some showers, and it's just kind of been, of course, a struggle to get water.
Atlanta Mayor Andre Dickens continues to face questions and criticism over his initial public response. The emergency has also turned a spotlight on the city's aging infrastructure.
Pipes may not be political, but the conversation spurred by a break can have big ripple effects. I'm WAB politics reporter Sam Gringlas.
And I'm WAB politics reporter Rahul Bali. And this is Plugged In, a WABE politics podcast. Sam, welcome to Atlanta City Hall.
So, Rahul, we are in the city council chambers. It's this room that kind of looks like a spaceship, like the Battlestar Galactica. It's this circular room with wood-paneled and stone-covered walls and a big circular ceiling. And this is where city council meets, including this week, as a water crisis unfolded in the city of Atlanta.
And we're actually sitting in the same place that the public gets to sit in, and reporters also get to sit in if you ever watch Atlanta City Council meeting, and then the dais for all the members of the council is out in front of us. You know, I spent a good bit of my Monday right here as the water emergency entered its 4th day, but let's back up a little bit. Tell me about the city and the mayor's response as these water issues first unfolded.
Well, Rahul, the mayor did not issue a public statement until nearly 24 hours after the first break on Friday. Text messages about the boil water advisory did not go out to residents until nearly 21 hours after that advisory first went into effect. And, you know, a map showing the footprint of the boil advisory was really blurry and hard to read. I live right on the boundary of that line, and at the time I was really confused if I needed to boil or not. Amplifying this for many people was the fact that Mayor Andre Dickens had traveled to Memphis on Friday for meetings and a campaign fundraiser and didn't return until late Saturday morning. Dickens says when he left, the consensus was that the water main break was similar to the hundreds of others the city has dealt with over the last year, but that didn't really satisfy a lot of people who were frustrated over the city's initial response.
And, you know, we heard some of those frustrations in the council meeting earlier this week where I'm sitting right now. This past Monday, I was here from 9 in the morning till 9 at night. There was already regularly scheduled committee meetings and then a full meeting of the Atlanta City Council, which included the public comment period.
You have multiple water main breaks that you're dealing with right now, yet you're giving a third of your budget to police. Where's the money for infrastructure? Where's the money for public works? Where's the money for watershed? Where is the money that we need to truly fortify this city instead of putting it into vanity projects?
Sam, that's Reverend Kiana Jones of Atlanta's Park Avenue Baptist Church. She's been a critic of the city, the council, and the mayor over a number of issues, including the building of the new Atlanta Public Safety Training Center, which opponents have called Cop City. I should point out, in the city of Atlanta, most water and sewer funding and spending is handled with a separate budget, much of that funded by a separate 1% municipal sales tax, along with water and sewer fees.
So at the top of the show, we heard from residents who were frustrated about procuring water for their homes, for their families. But, you know, businesses were also hit really hard, and you heard some of those frustrations at council as well.
Yeah, one of the folks we heard from on Monday here at City Hall was Trinket Lewis. She's the co-founder and operator of More Life Juice in Southwest Atlanta. She talked about her business being down about 60%.
Which means I've had to call everyone off. You know, I've had to go out and store to store looking for ice, because obviously we can't make smoothies without ice. If I don't have clean, sanitized water, I'm now having to boil the water, then that means I can't clean throughout the business. So we were able to stay open about 1/3 of the day, but then the traffic just wasn't coming in as well, because people are thinking we're shut down.
So Sam, Monday evening, just before 6 p.m., Mayor Andre Dickens appeared here in the city council chamber to address council members right over there to your right. One of the things he did address is doing something for affected businesses in Atlanta. There were not a lot of details, but a basic ordinance was introduced by City Council member Matt Westmoreland. I spoke with him after the council meeting.
All 12 of us here today have co-sponsored legislation that will create a fund over at Invest Atlanta with an initial $5 million in it. That similar to the process we laid out during COVID, where small businesses could apply for a grant. And we will be working with the administration to get that money over to Invest Atlanta as quickly as possible.
Westmoreland tells me the plan is to get all the details together and present them in committee next week with a goal of final passage by the city council the week after. Why is this all so important? It's one thing to inconvenience folks. It's another thing for business owners and workers who are dealing with loss of income and loss of money. So I'll be watching those upcoming council meetings, along with expecting more questions about what happened and the administration's response.
So let's talk a little bit more about that response, Rahul. On Monday, I called up Dr. Stephen Murphy at Tulane School of Public Health and Tropical Medicine, and he actually runs the disaster management program there. And I asked him kind of what's the roadmap for good crisis communication during a disaster or an emergency. And here's what he said.
First thing that we have to really remember is the top 3 tenets of crisis communications, and that's being first, being right, and being credible.
Now, Murphy says it is hard to be first in the age of social media, but he says Atlanta probably did not do enough initially to keep the public informed.
You can't take the risk of that becoming a public health crisis with people in the middle of brushing their teeth and taking several chugs of water.
And Murphy says when there's a void of information, misinformation can end up filling the void really quickly.
When you have a public that is yearning for information and just not getting that thirst quenched very well, you run the risk of damaging any trust.
So Sam, let me tease this out a little more. Eventually, communication did improve with regular updates and press conferences. But do you think trust has been irreversibly damaged here?
Well, Dickens and his staff have apologized for the lack of communication during the first 24 hours of the emergency. Dickens said the city needed to do a better job of communicating, and in the future, they will. Here's also what he said when asked by reporters if he didn't get back to town fast enough.
When you go away from town, you still have COO, deputy COO, you still have a commissioner, you also have almost 1,000 workers in the watershed management department. You have teams of people. So if the mayor of Atlanta can't leave for 24 hours at any time, that's a concern.
And Dickens says the city has learned from the last few days and will do better. Rahul, you covered Dickens' 2021 run for mayor. Can you just put Dickens' management of this debacle in some context?
Sam, I had just joined WABE Radio, and covering the mayoral campaign was one of my first big stories. As a candidate, Andre Dickens was everywhere, doing forums and meeting people. I mean, I remember forums in like really, really small restaurants. Then when he got elected, that continued. You would see him everywhere. You would see him at crime scenes, at major events. He was always out there. So that's why what happened with the water main break was just different. He was not there, and that's what was noticeable compared to what he had been as a candidate and as mayor. Looking ahead to a campaign, he's had his ups and he's had his downs. His ups include, stopping the effort to split Buckhead away from the city of Atlanta. But he's also had blowback over things like the new Atlanta Public Safety Training Center, and now, of course, this.
And protests. People have protested speeches, appearances of the mayor over the Public Safety Training Center. It will be interesting to see if this latest debacle kind of reaches a broader audience than just the folks protesting the Public Safety Training Center. But I wonder, do you think that Dickens' handling of the water outages will affect a reelection bid or even a run for higher office down the road. You know, people do have short memories, but I wonder, will this stick? Can he regain trust? What do you think?
Look, how leaders respond in a crisis is a big test. Let's go back to 2014. Former Governor Nathan Deal, former Atlanta Mayor Kasim Reed faced criticism for their response to a big ice storm that people knew a snow apocalypse. Folks got stuck in their cars on frozen roads. Kids got stuck in schools. And in the end, that really, in the end, did not affect Nathan Deal, who had a reelection campaign later that year. That you've got part of it is going to be possibly short memories and maybe other issues that come into play.
I mean, I also, though, think about the stain of President George W. Bush's response to Hurricane Katrina, or in my own state, Governor Rick Snyder's handling of the water crisis in Flint, Michigan, though obviously those were way more catastrophic than what unfolded in Atlanta this week. Or you can even think about Republicans' criticism of the Biden administration's handling of the withdrawal from Afghanistan. Again, an extreme example. People died in that withdrawal. That is not the case here, or even close. But there are so many examples of when a leader needs to rise to the occasion, and when they don't quite meet that threshold, voters feel a certain way about it.
Sam, let me add one more thing about Dickens. The bottom line, it's really going to depend on who runs against him, how well funded that challenger is, and then what issues they go after him on.
And, not to say that these are similar situations, but I'm also thinking about Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis, who faced a Democratic challenger this year, who tried to make the case that Willis endangered the Georgia election interference case involving former President Trump when she engaged in a relationship with a top prosecutor she hired. But even despite that, Willis went on to basically eviscerate her challenger with more than 80% of the vote.
So let's take a break here. You're listening to Plugged In, a WABE Politics podcast. Welcome back to Plugged In, a WABE Politics podcast. Now, Sam, I want to turn to the big picture and talk about Atlanta's aging infrastructure and its rapid growth.
Now, water main breaks are not uncommon, but boil water advisories are pretty rare. Though the city of Atlanta has experienced 530 main breaks in the last 12 months. Our colleague, environment reporter Marissa Mecki, spoke with Joe Brown. He's a professor of environmental sciences and engineering at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Previously, he was a professor at Georgia Tech.
So you could definitely experience breakages or pressure changes on one side of the system that have downstream effects on other places in the system.
When breaks cause the pipes to lose that pressure, groundwater or other contaminants from outside the pipes can get in. That's why we have a boil water advisory. Now, frequent breaks are happening because in many cases, these pipes are 80 or 90 years old. They're corroding. They've reached the end of their lifespans.
And I've lived in Atlanta a long time, Sam. I first came here in 1994, and it has grown so much. Not just the metro area, but the city itself. More people actually live here in the city. More people actually work here in the city. I mean, I look at Midtown and I look at Atlantic Station, and they're completely different from when I came here in 1994. And all of that growth has been on top of a very old water and sewer infrastructure. And I want to mention two names that you may have heard or will hear again, and they are Shirley Franklin and Michael Thurmond. Let's start with Shirley Franklin. She was mayor of Atlanta from 2002 to 2010. She made fixing the city's sewer system a priority. She was even told she may not win a second term over it. In the end, she won re-election easily because there were no major challengers, and she owned the idea of, being an infrastructure or even a sewer mayor.
The sewer mayor. That is not something you hear every day.
You're right, Sam. She absolutely owned it. Now, let's skip forward to this past Tuesday. And I made my way over to DeKalb County, where County CEO Michael Thurmond announced that he's pursuing a water and sewer rate increase. Now, a couple of things to note there. He made clear this was not in reaction to what happened in Atlanta, but he did connect the two.
We must now be courageous enough not to wait until we are on the loop on 6 and 11 and 8 a.m. on all our wonderful TV stations. We have to act proactively now.
Thurmond did note that he's leaving office at the end of the year and that he's doing this so it doesn't fall on his successor. But he did note that DeKalb, which, depending on the numbers, is either the third or fourth largest county by population in Georgia, has only one water treatment plant, and it needs to be updated or else.
Yeah, and in Atlanta, Dickens called these last few days a wake-up call.
The past few days were a call to action for all of us. Every city in America has aging infrastructure, and we will rise to meet this moment to ensure that residents and businesses alike have reliable access to water.
Dickens also appealed for help from the federal government. While the city has received billions in federal dollars through the bipartisan infrastructure law for the Beltline, safer streets upgrades, the airport, none of that has been for water or sewerage. But there is federal money available for these projects. Our colleague Marissa Mecki sent me several pages of grants available from the EPA for cities. And Dickens says the cost to upgrade Atlanta's water infrastructure to where it needs to be is probably in the billions with a B, is what he said. And he also said he's appointed a blue ribbon commission to implement recommendations from the Army Corps of Engineers who's on hand, but that will take time and money. And, Atlanta has 3,000 miles of water lines. But it's crises like these, Rahul, that really do highlight the aging infrastructure in our city and in our country, issues that may also worsen as climate change causes more regular flooding.
Sam, I want to note another important headline this week before we go. Just down the street from here, the Georgia Court of Appeals has paused proceedings in the criminal case focused on efforts by former President Donald Trump and others to interfere with the 2020 election result.
That's right, Rahul. So this decision means the case will essentially grind to a halt until October or later. That's when the appeals court will weigh if Fulton County DA Fani Willis can remain on the case. The court has tentatively scheduled arguments October 4th in front of a 3-judge panel. Now, just to back up, in March, a judge allowed Willis to remain on the case after several defendants accused her of a conflict due to a relationship with the top prosecutor she hired. Trump and others appealed that ruling. It is now before the appeals court. Now, the appeals court does not have to actually hold oral arguments. They can just rule, but they may be inclined to hear it given the gravity of the case and some unsettled legal territory. These are often very quick. I think each side just gets 15 minutes to present their argument, and they're not rustling up new evidence. It's just considering whether the lower court applied the law correctly. The court has until March of 2025 to issue a decision. Now, this may seem like a huge slowdown, and it is, but legal experts say this timeline is not uncommon for the busy Court of Appeals in Georgia. The judges assigned to hear the appeal are all appointees of Republican governors, Republican Governor Brian Kemp and former Governor Nathan Deal. Now, a New York jury has found Trump guilty on 34 felony counts, but these pending criminal cases in Georgia, Washington, D.C., and Florida appear unlikely to go to trial before the November election.
So that's all the time we have for this edition of Plugged In, a WABE Politics podcast. You can get more Georgia politics online at wabe.org/election2024.
Plugged In is a production of the WABE Politics Desk. Our producer is Brendan Rivers. Our managing editor is Alex Halmick.
And a special thanks to WABE's Julian Virgin for the audio that you heard at the beginning of the show.
And do us a favor, hit that subscribe button wherever you get your podcasts and leave us a review. We'll be back next Friday.